Aurangzeb, the sixth Mughal emperor, is one of the most controversial and polarizing figures in Indian history. During his reign from 1658 to 1707, the Mughal Empire reached its peak in terms of territorial expansion, but it also laid the foundation for its eventual decline. Aurangzeb was a complex ruler known for his military prowess, administrative acumen, and religious orthodoxy. His policies, particularly those related to religion and governance, have been intensely debated among historians and scholars. While some view him as a devout Muslim ruler who sought to establish a just and moral order, others criticize him for his intolerance toward non-Muslims and his heavy-handed policies that alienated large sections of his subjects. Aurangzeb's early years. Aurangzeb was born on November 3, 1618, to Emperor Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal. He was the third son of Shah Jahan, and from an early age he displayed a keen interest in religious studies and military affairs. Unlike his brothers, who were more inclined toward the arts and culture, Aurangzeb was profoundly spiritual and adhered strictly to Islamic principles. His early education was comprehensive, encompassing both religious and secular subjects. He was well versed in the Quran, Hadith, and Islamic jurisprudence and received training in military tactics and statecraft. Aurangzeb's early years were marked by a series of military campaigns and administrative assignments that prepared him for the challenges of ruling a vast and diverse empire. At the age of 18, he was appointed Viceroy of the Deccan, a region fraught with political instability and rebellion. During his tenure as Viceroy, Aurangzeb gained valuable experience in governance and military strategy. He successfully quelled several rebellions and consolidated Mughal authority in the region. It wasn't straightforward for Aurangzeb to become king. When Shah Jahan got sick in 1657, his four sons got into a nasty fight over who would take over as king. After a series of brutal battles, Aurangzeb emerged victorious. He defeated and imprisoned his eldest brother, Dara Shikoh, who was considered the heir apparent. Aurangzeb's victory was a show of how smart and strategic he was as a politician and as a military leader. He skillfully waded through the Mughal court's complicated web of alliances and rivalries to win the support of essential nobles and military leaders. The grand arc of Aurangzeb's reign. Aurangzeb's reign as the Mughal emperor began in 1658 and lasted for nearly 5 decades. His rule is often divided into 2 distinct phases. The first phase, characterized by military expansion and administrative reforms, and the second phase, marked by internal strife, rebellion, and the gradual decline of the empire. Aurangzeb's first few years in power were spent building up and expanding the Mughal Empire. He started several military campaigns to put down rebellions in provinces and take control of new areas for the Mughal Empire. Some of his most critical military achievements were taking over Bijapur and Golconda, annexing the Deccan sultanates, and expanding Mughal control over southern India. Aurangzeb's military campaigns weren't just about taking over more land, they were also about establishing Mughal rule and Islamic law in areas that the empire hadn't been able to reach before. The second phase of Aurangzeb's reign was marked by increasing challenges and difficulties. The empire's vast size and diversity made it difficult to maintain centralized control, and Aurangzeb's policies often alienated large sections of his subjects. His strict enforcement of Islamic law and his policies toward non-Muslims, particularly Hindus, led to widespread discontent and rebellion. The most significant of these rebellions was the Maratha uprising led by Shivaji, which seriously threatened Mughal authority in the Deccan. As a leader, Aurangzeb was conscientious and strict. He was deeply involved in the day-to-day running of the state, often closely supervising the administration to ensure the correct execution of his policies. In Aurangzeb's government, there was a strong focus on justice and accountability. He was known for closely following Islamic law and wanted to make his empire fair and fair-minded. Rearranging the Mughal bureaucracy was one of Aurangzeb's most important administrative achievements. His reforms were meant to improve government work and make it more open. For instance, he established a system of regular checks and balances to ensure that officials did their jobs honestly and correctly. He also started a system of appointments based on competence and honesty instead of social status or connections. Aurangzeb's administration was also marked by a strong emphasis on justice and the rule of law. He established a network of courts and judicial officials to ensure that justice was accessible to all his subjects. He was known for his involvement in the administration of justice, often holding court and hearing cases himself. Aurangzeb's commitment to justice and accountability earned him the respect and admiration of many of his subjects. A strong sense of morality and religious devotion marked Aurangzeb's personal life. He was a devout Muslim who adhered strictly to Islamic principles and sought to live a life of piety and simplicity. Unlike his predecessors, who were known for their lavish lifestyles and indulgence in luxury, Aurangzeb led an austere and ascetic life. He was known for his frugality and his disdain for extravagance and opulence. Many people have said bad things about Aurangzeb's strict religious beliefs and the way he treated people who were not Muslim. Some see him as a religious Muslim leader who tried to make the world more fair and moral. In contrast, others see him as an intolerant and racist leader who hurt the Mughal Empire's pluralistic spirit by punishing non-Muslims. People have strong feelings about Aurangzeb's rules for Hindus. He brought back the jizya tax on non-Muslims, which Akbar had gotten rid of, and he told people to destroy several Hindu temples. Due to these policies, many have called Aurangzeb religiously intolerant and racist, hurting his reputation. Another controversial part of Aurangzeb's rule is how he treated Hindu religious groups. Other historians say Aurangzeb's actions show that he was intolerable and hostile toward non-Muslims, while others say they were driven by political concerns rather than religious bigotry. Reintroducing the jizya tax was one of the most controversial parts of Aurangzeb's policies toward Hindus. Jizya taxes were charged to people who were not Muslims living in Islamic countries. People perceived these taxes as an indication of their inferior status. Like Akbar, Aurangzeb ended the jizya in 1679 as part of his policy of religious tolerance. Hindus strongly disagreed with this decision, which caused a lot of anger and criticism. Aurangzeb's treatment of Hindu temples has also been a subject of debate. His orders included destroying many Hindu temples, such as the well-known Kashi Vishwanath temple in Varanasi and the Chhaava Deo temple in Mathura. Others saw these actions as proof of Aurangzeb's religious intolerance and his desire to stop Hinduism. However, some historians argue that politics, not religious prejudice, drove Aurangzeb's actions. There is evidence that Aurangzeb supported some Hindu temples and did not always mistreat Hindus. Despite these problems, it is important to remember that Hindus continued to be part of the Mughal government during Aurangzeb's rule. Numerous Hindus held significant positions in the military and administration of the Mughal Empire. That's not a simple story of religious intolerance and persecution. Aurangzeb's policies toward Hindus were complicated and had many sides. Aurangzeb's reign was marked by a series of military campaigns and battles that expanded the Mughal Empire to its greatest territorial extent. His military campaigns were not just about territorial expansion. They also aimed to consolidate Mughal authority and enforce Islamic law in regions that had previously been beyond the empire's reach. Taking over the Deccan Sultanates was one of Aurangzeb's most critical military achievements. The Deccan had a long history of political unrest and rebellion, and Aurangzeb thought that taking them over was necessary for the Mughal Empire's safety and stability. He started a series of military campaigns against the Deccan Sultanates, and in 1686 and 1687 he took over Bijapur and Golconda. The Mughal Empire's territory growth peaked with these victories, which gave the Mughals more control over southern India. But Aurangzeb's military campaigns in the Deccan also had a big problem. The long and expensive wars in the Deccan drained the Mughal Empire's money and resources to their limits. The Maratha uprising, which was led by Shivaji and then by his successors, posed a serious threat to Mughal rule in the Deccan and started a long, bloody war that lasted decades. The Marathas used guerrilla tactics to fight back against the Mughals and took advantage of the Deccan's rough terrain. Even though Aurangzeb tried very hard, he couldn't wholly control the Marathas. The fighting in the Deccan would continue to affect the Mughal Empire long after he died. In the last few years of Aurangzeb's reign, problems and challenges worsened. It was difficult to keep centralized control over the empire because it was so significant and varied, and Aurangzeb's policies often made many of his subjects dislike him. The long and expensive wars in the Deccan and the Maratha uprisings stressed the Mughal treasury and the empire's resources. Aurangzeb passed away in Ahmednagar, Maharashtra, on March 3, 1707. His death marked the end of an era and the start of the Mughal Empire's fall. Even though Aurangzeb worked hard to keep the empire stable and whole, his rule set the stage for its fall. Aurangzeb's legacy. In Indian history, Aurangzeb's legacy is one of the most talked about and argued over. His rule was the peak of the Mughal Empire's territorial growth, but it also set the stage for its decline. Scholars and historians have had many disagreements about Aurangzeb's policies, especially those related to religion and government. Aurangzeb is remembered for his skill at war, his intelligence in running the government, and his dedication to justice and accountability. Under his rule, the Mughal Empire grew to its fullest size. He also changed the way the government worked to make it more efficient and open. On the other hand, Aurangzeb is criticized for his intolerant attitude toward non-Muslims. People have said that the jizya tax was unfair and that Hindu temples were destroyed, which is an example of religious persecution. Many people don't like Aurangzeb because of how he treated Hindus. Aurangzeb's legacy in contemporary India is complex and multifaceted. He is a figure of both admiration and controversy, and his reign continues to be the subject of intense debate and discussion. In modern India, Aurangzeb was often portrayed as a symbol of religious intolerance and bigotry, particularly in the context of Hindu-Muslim relations. His policies toward Hindus, including the reimposition of the jizya tax and the destruction of Hindu temples, have made him a controversial figure in Indian history. In the end, Aurangzeb was a complicated and multifaceted king whose rule marked both the peak and the start of the fall of the Mughal Empire. His policies, especially those concerning religion and government, have been hotly debated and criticized. Some see him as a religious Muslim leader who tried to make the world more fair and moral. In contrast, others see him as an intolerant and racist leader who hurt the Mughal Empire's pluralistic spirit by punishing non-Muslims. These arguments, along with the larger political and social context, shape modern India's view of Aurangzeb. Because of this, he is still a figure of both awe and controversy, and his rule is still the subject of much analysis and discussion.